I'm not sure if anyone else feels the same way that I do, but there are very few games that I actually get excited for nowadays. This is mainly because there aren't really that many developers or publishers that consistently release games that I get excited for, or that are even complete. I don't really care about any of Ubisoft's games. I still have trust issues from their Watch Dogs E3 announcement, if you remember that. And I tried both Odyssey and Valhalla, and good lord, those games were boring. The same goes for EA, Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, Bungie, Square Enix. Now, I may try some of their games, but they don't have games that I think are worthwhile playing, either in premise or presentation most of the time. There are exceptions to this though. Some game companies like Zaum, Mobius Digital, and Obsidian, they'll always get my attention no matter what, but the absolute top of that list is Playdead. They're a studio based in Denmark, and they have made two of what I believe to be the greatest games of all time, Limbo and Inside. The latter of which is my personal favorite, and I don't think it's talked about nearly as much as it should be. Originally released in 2016, Inside received widespread critical acclaim for its presentation, story, and gameplay. The story is hard to describe without immediately getting into spoilers, but essentially you play as a boy traveling across a dystopian world, avoiding dangers and solving puzzles along the way. It sounds like a simple premise, and at first it is, but over the course of its approximately 4-hour runtime, there are some truly shocking and mind-bending revelations that transform the world's initial simplicity into a disturbing nightmare filled with endless intrigue and, at times, pretty grotesque horror. The more you learn about this world, the more questions you'll have about it. It's a 2.5D puzzle platformer with probably the most organic tutorial I've ever seen in a game. It doesn't tell you the controls, there's no tutorial mission, characters can't even talk to you. There's no dialogue in this game at all for that matter, which truly does make you feel alone throughout the whole experience. That's part of the mystery of the game, especially at the beginning. Why are you alone in a forest? Why are these men chasing you? Why are you in danger immediately? Also, where did you even come from? You just emerged from some trees into the game without any explanation. You're dropped into danger immediately, and it's up to you to understand exactly what's going on. Again, without going into spoilers too much, some of these questions kind of get answered later on, but enough is left ambiguous so that when the end credits roll, the player wants to learn more about this creepy dystopia. The number of theories that people have come up with because of the main story and secrets and Easter eggs are astounding. Whilst playing, it really made me feel like I was experiencing a small part of a much larger, darker world. This atmosphere, God damn. This atmosphere, I did it again! This atmosphere, there we go, of mystery is held together by the amazing art style. The minimalism of this world leaves so much to your imagination. The lack of facial features on any of the characters, the seemingly endless landscapes, and the impossibly large interiors make you fill in the blanks of this world with the worst creations your mind can come up with. Most other games in the genre don't really utilize minimalism in the same way, if at all. Take Little Nightmares 2 for example, a game that I also love. It has more complex mechanics and is set in a more fantastical world than Inside. Imagine if children's bedtime stories were R-rated, that's Little Nightmares 2. Both games have you playing as a small child, traveling through a progressively disturbing world. However, Little Nightmares 2 presents its horror a little differently. I absolutely love the monsters in this game. They have really unique designs and make just the creepiest sounds you can imagine. I hate those little hand guys though, they're the worst. I even got the achievement for excessively bashing them after they'd already died. But the horror here is much more overt. You see these monsters for long periods of time, understanding their movements and mannerisms and behaviors. In some cases, you can even use this understanding to defeat them. There are subtle moments in this game as well, but it relies much more on the intricately crafted environments and monsters for its horror. Inside, on the other hand, is as much about what you don't see as what you do. In Little Nightmares 2, you know the monsters. In Inside, you don't. The former scares me, the latter disturbs me. But Inside isn't the only game with which Playdead have used minimalism. Their previous game, Limbo, uses this artistic method in its own unique way with the black and white film grain aesthetic. Now, if you played Limbo, you'll know that both games are very similar. They have almost the exact same start, and they both have pretty ambiguous endings. A small child travels through an increasingly dangerous world that includes a woodland countryside area along with industrial buildings. There are also similar gameplay elements in Limbo that get expanded upon in Inside. So the question is, if both games are almost identical, what makes Inside stand apart from Limbo? And the answer, for me at least, is how realistic Inside can feel. You'll come across streetlights, farms, cars, worn wooden buildings, alleyways, symbols of modernity in ruin for reasons unknown. And the level of tiny detail in this destruction are what make it the most unnerving to me. There wasn't a nuclear war that caused this collapse, nor years of armed conflict. It's almost as if it silently fell apart. Buildings stand in a catatonic state, much like the enslaved population that fill the streets. These zombified people exemplify the criticism that many have of modern society. These mindless masses stumble around in a semi-conscious state while being controlled by the faceless, inhumane elite. The idea that Earth could become this one day instills more horror than any single word of dialogue could. This dangerous, desolate place, filled with mystery and horror, feels almost prophetic, as if this world isn't a possibility, but an inevitability. The narrative structure adds so much to this realism. There are no cutscenes or pauses in the game, it's all one seamless experience. It employs very subtle techniques to separate each section, but it never feels jarring or out of place. It reminds me of the film Children of Men, or more appropriately, Little Nightmares, which also splits up its narrative into distinct parts without it feeling too obvious. I don't mean to imply that if a narrative is split up into parts it's unrealistic or breaks the immersion. I just find those that don't have breaks like chapters or episodes a far sight more immersive than those that do. In a 2016 GDC presentation, Mikkel Gjørl and Mikkel Svensson, I'm really sorry if I've butchered your names, they discuss a lot of the technical elements that went into creating the atmosphere and mood of the game. Now, I'm mainly going to be focusing on the first half of the presentation, but I would recommend watching the whole thing. It's really interesting, although I understood like maybe half of it because it's super technical and I know very little about game development. But Gjørl initially talks about the fact that the game has a fixed camera, allowing the dev team to construct the desired experience with a greater sense of control compared to most other games. When they see everything that the player sees, they're able to manipulate each scene to truly enhance the overall experience. If you take any game where the camera isn't fixed, the devs have much less control over what the player is going to experience, making the development process a far sight more complicated as they now have to account for as many gameplay decisions that the player may make. This is beneficial to games in which experimentation and discovery is encouraged, but this could also be a possible downside for much more linear games as aspects of the artistic vision could get lost because of the player's actions. By employing this fixed perspective, Playdead were able to maintain their vision as many more aspects of the game are controlled. This fixed 2.5D perspective also allowed them to simplify certain effects.
So initially, actually, quite a lot of scenes were literally just geometry and this depth fog, which sort of in line with Limbo, relied a lot on silhouettes to create the mood.
All they really had to do was up the depth fog during specific moments, which dramatically alters the mood, giving it this eerie, mysterious feel. And I'm not trying to imply that the development of this game was easy at all. In fact, large parts of the presentation are dedicated to the complexity of lighting and shadows, but there are certain parts of its development that was certainly made easier with this fixed perspective. It's less work through a greater sense of control. And it absolutely pays off. The shadows and fog and silhouettes mixed with the oppressive setting create such an off-putting experience. This is also combined with the background details found in each scene. You get a glimpse of a once prosperous outside world that has since been ruined, but so much is obscured by the effective use of lighting and shadows that you're left wondering what may lie beyond the horizon or maybe right around the corner. Take this room for example. Light peers in from the right, casting an eerie spotlight on the knelt man in the background. It's such evocative imagery, a hint to the larger theme of control that gets expanded upon later on. We're engulfed in this utterly creepy ambient music, representing the shift in tone from here on out. It's also an accompaniment to what we're about to do. This is the first time that we, as the boy, participate in the darkness that we've only witnessed up to this point. Killing people at random in Call of Duty or Battlefield is a truly emotionless task, but playing as a small boy, ripping the tail off a pig, dragging it across a room, and mounting it to take control of brainless enslaved workers, is a type of disturbing that I don't think I've experienced anywhere else. And when it's all done, you have to go up a ramp into darkness, into the unknown. The sound design here is also just incredible. The sense of dread and horror is amplified by the eerie sounds of the forest and the lifeless ambience of the inner city. This feeling is instilled in you from the opening seconds of the game. The creepy ambience is the only sound that accompanies your footsteps, a subtle suggestion that you may not be the only presence in these woods. This kind of effect can be found in almost every section, giving you this feeling that nowhere is truly safe, even when you feel like the only person there. You have no idea what's coming next, and the fact that no larger mechanical sounds can be heard for parts of the game, despite how many other people you come across, is so disconcerting. No matter where you are, small sounds echo in large farms, factories, and labs. The loudest sounds come from human creation. Gigantic mechanical doors, the clapping sound of lifeless marching, the whirring of machines. But when you're outside, nothing. The little life that does exist out here is small, delicate, vulnerable. This world is huge and dead. The man-made horrors, the violence and emotional indifference of the other humans, the lack of facial features, the empty landscapes. Humanity is gone, both metaphorically and literally. Most of the world is dead, and those who are still alive have no humanity. No other game immerses you in a dead world quite like this one. It does so much with so little. It covers topics of human experimentation, mind control, the destructiveness of human nature, class divide, overbearing governmental control, weapons of mass destruction. I've never had such a profound experience with a game in such a short amount of time. When I first played this, I was 16 and it completely changed the way that I thought games could be. At the time, all I played was Call of Duty or Battlefield or Tony Hawk, especially Project 8, that game is so good, but I'd never really experienced a true indie game until this one. And that's the reason why I'm making this video. I just wanted to talk about my favorite game, and I wish more people talked about it too. I know that others have covered this game in much more detail than I have, but I wanted to explain the feel of the game as best I could. If you haven't already, I would highly recommend playing this game. It's an incredible experience, and one that I always find myself coming back to again and again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.